for a culture of sexualization and harassment. We put together a really exciting group of panelists. I'm going to do a short introduction for each of them and then give them a chance to add anything that they would like. We're going to spend some time in the discussion and then open up the conversation to your questions. We ask that you keep yourselves on mute, but we encourage you to drop any questions or comments that you have into the chat box. We're going to pay attention to those and then bring them back towards the end of the roundtable. We are recording this conversation and we'll make the recording available to everybody who registered. So if you don't want your image included, please be sure to turn off your camera. And then if you have any logistical or technical issues or questions, feel free to message in the chat and somebody on the Hardy Girls Healthy Women staff will help you out. So now we're gonna introduce our panel quickly. So first off, we have Alexandria Villa. Her pronouns are she, her, hers, and she's a junior at Colby College, and she's from Coral Springs, Florida, and is majoring in psychology with a concentration in neuroscience, as well as following the pre-med track. She is a Hardy Girls muse and the president of the Womxn of Color Alliance at Colby. In her free time, she enjoys baking, parasailing, and reading Spanish poetry. She chooses to cause a ruckus in the world by questioning those around her to think critically about how they treat her. Welcome, Alexandria. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, you said everything perfectly. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. Next up, we have Judicaelle Irakoze, and her pronouns are she, her, hers as well. She is the executive director of Choose Yourself. She's a community organizer, a feminist whose activism exists at the intersections of race and gender. Welcome, Judicaelle. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No, thank you so much. That was nice.
Next up, we have Tawoma Martinez, and her pronouns are also she, her, hers. She has worked in law enforcement for the last 20 years and has been working as an advocate at the Maliseet Domestic Violence and Sexual Violence Advocacy Center for the past 11 months. She is Mescalero, Jicarilla, Apache, and Oglala Lakota, and tries to follow traditional life ways in all she does. She wants to see this earth taken care of for the next 7 generations by respecting ourselves and others. Welcome, Tawoma. Anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. Yes, I'm also, I lead women's group. I teach beadwork and sewing classes at different times. I'm a dancer. I dance women's traditional style. I've taught dance class for young women here in the community and in Canada. I'm the mom of 1 son, and we travel the US and Canada to dance and teach dance classes and sewing classes and beadwork classes. So I just try to stay involved and help our youth in a positive manner. Thank you.
Well, as part of the youth, we all thank you. And lastly, we have Aela Mansman, whose pronouns are she, her, hers, and she is a 16-year-old junior currently attending South Portland High School, but she expands her work beyond the media community as a dedicated activist and advocate for young people across the country. Aela is known for her work at SafeBae as the youth organizing director, youth advisor at the Break the Cycle, and as an activist in many other topics as well. Welcome, Aela. Is there anything you would like to add?
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you, everyone. So now we're gonna break into the question and conversation section. So I'm gonna read off some questions, and panelists, feel free to jump in and add anything. We're gonna try to make this like a conversation style. So first up, we have, when we reached out to you to be on this panel, what made you say yes to the invitation, and what does this work mean to you?
Well, I can go. I was so honored to be asked to be on this panel today. While my work to end sexual assault and harassment among teens is completely intersectional. As a young woman, I feel so passionate about female empowerment, and I love this organization. And so I'm really excited to be here and to really embrace my young female roots.
I'm honored
Great.
to be here, and I wanted to, as traditional people, we are matriarchal, and that's one thing. European society is a patriarchy, and so I'm trying to encourage our young women to take our traditional roles and be proud of being a matriarch, our matriarch in training. Our women are the ones who carry our traditions and our language. They're the life givers, the aunties, grandmas, who we all raise our men and women. Before they're taught to become warriors, they're nourished by women. And we need to embrace our roles and find that balance in life, that we can also work in a man's world while maintaining our traditional values. And that's what I want to encourage young people, both men and women, to find that balance.
Thank you so much. Alexandria or Judicaelle, is there anything you would like to ask?
Yeah, I'd like to say a few things. When I first approached with this opportunity, I was very much excited because, in the current social sphere I have, it's very difficult on campus to have like these larger conversations with people because of, the world we're living in currently. So I was very much excited to be a part and engage in conversations around issues that are relevant to both my personal experience and more so a global experience that females and women have to deal with in our current society. So I was very much like, no, I want to be a part of this conversation. And so that's why I'm here today.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I was talking, I didn't realize I was muted. I think everyone has said what I wanted to say. It's very much personal as well. As a young Black woman, I exist at all the intersections that comes with sexual violence, either from race, either from gender, either from class realities. So it's personal for me to be here. It's also political because of the work I do at Treat Yourself. So it's just a joy and honor to say yes and be part of this.
Well, once again, thank you all for being here. We're very excited to hear from all of you. So, Aela, I'll say this next question is for you. So rather than just sexual harassment, we modified the subject matter of this panel to include the culture of sexualization. And you are a fellow high schooler like me, and I know that there's a lot going on in high school. So what does the term sexualization mean to you?
That's a great question. When I think of the term sexualization, the first thing that comes to mind for me is really just the high school culture. I'm currently attending South Portland High School. I'm a student. And while that isn't going to represent all high schools around the country, I've definitely found how a culture of respect and in many cases a lack of culture of a respective culture really contributes to rape culture, and therefore can really contribute to sexualization and a negative culture that many young women walk into without knowing what it is, what it's about. I was always raised to embrace my body, to embrace my sexuality, to embrace who I am, my identity. to its full extent. But when I entered high school, that honestly changed. I felt like I had to modify who I was, my identity, to what was acceptable. And I've learned that that's not the way. And I encourage all young women to embrace themselves fully, regardless of what culture and what the culture wants to break you down to be. Just embrace who you are and release all the norms that everyone will tell you to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know what you mean. Going into high school, everything kind of changes, and you start becoming more aware of yourself and more aware of others. And I think while that's a good thing to be aware of ourselves and others in this situation, I feel like we shouldn't have to do that as much as we do as women. So I definitely agree with everything you said. Going on to the next question, I'll aim this towards Alexandria. So the very public nature of the Me Too movement prompted so many people to come forward for the first time, for many of them, about events that had happened to them, sometimes even years ago. So why do you think that movement was so effective, or in other words, got such a big response on a topic that most had felt very private about before?
Great question. I think the Me Too movement gained the traction that it did and the attention that it needed, honestly, at a time, and had just multitudes of people coming forward, because I think at that point, a lot of people were, to an extent fed up, and, bearing that pain, it became a non-negotiable. It was, I am no longer going to repress and hold this within. And then, it kind of worked like a domino effect. One person told a story, one person came up, another person came up, and then it just led to other people coming up, because it's kind of fearful to go out on a limb and say something and come out and tell the truth and explain your pain and your hurt and your trauma in whichever way it occurred. It's very difficult to take that first step, because there's so much shame that's put onto people and so much victim blaming that occurs. So it is quite difficult to want to speak up. But when the Me Too movement started, it was that was enough. It was definitely the spark that lit a flame and started a fire. And I really do believe that when, using our social media and using our hashtag and formulating communities and providing resources of how to deal with this. Okay, yes, it happened years ago, but that doesn't invalidate your experience in any way. I think formulating that community around the hashtags, the Instagram pages, and all of those things were pivotal and key as to why the level of awareness grew so quickly.
Yeah, totally. Is there anything else anyone would like to touch on that topic?
I think I will also add that the Me Too movement was a momentum of different women breaking silence. And then it also took privileged women to come forward with their stories as well, for the momentum to be as big as it is, which is the responsibility of having a privilege in any way, to be able to realize when it's time for you to speak up, when it's time for you to use your platform, when it's time for you to stand up, when it's time for you to amplify it. Because when you look at the history of Me Too, when Tarana Burke started it in 2008 and what happened in 2016, it took 8 years of women using that hashtag, of women breaking their stories, for all of us to reach a state where it was thousands, hundreds, and millions of women using that hashtag. So yeah, that's the history of Me Too. It's the responsibility of all of us as women, that maybe sisterhood, when we look at it in terms of privileges and how can each and everybody taps into the resources and the tools that they have, then we can actually challenge the patriarchal structures of sexual assault. If it becomes everyone's responsibility to use what they have and how they have it to break the silence.
Thank you for that. I definitely agree. I mean, as a white young woman myself, I try my best to recognize the privilege I have been given every single day in my life. And I think I'm trying my best, but I mean, obviously nobody's ever going to be perfect, but I think starting out young, I think it's going to, like, more and more people are going to be like going for it and telling their stories and giving people who don't have that privilege more of a platform and helping to amplify their voices and their stories. So I definitely agree. Tawoma, is there any statistics or facts that you know of about sexual harassment that you think people should know, or like if they don't remember anything else from this, that people should take away?
I don't have numbers, but I know there's a high statistic. Working in law enforcement, you know, you got a lot of old school guys who don't believe women belong in, I was primarily in corrections, and they don't believe that women belong there. But as there's more and more female offenders that have to be attended to in corrections, you definitely need females, and they understand that. But it's been a long haul. I've been in corrections for 20 years. And I worked in a halfway house for the mentally, criminally insane prior to that. And the amount of women in corrections is extremely low. At times in a facility of 30 officers, there was only 2 of us females. Here in Holton, out in Colorado, I worked in a maximum security facility, and you were lucky to have 2 or 3 females per shift in a facility that housed 1,000 women. You know, so there is sexual assault or harassment both against officers and inmates. It's a high number, unfortunately, on both parts, and I've experienced both. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say thank you for sharing that with us. I know that I have family members that have also worked in corrections, and I've heard stories, and I think you guys are all incredibly brave for the job that you do. Does anybody else have a statistic or kind of what Tawoma talked about, just high numbers of events happening?
I would love to share one. So in preparation today, I found a stat. Oh, now I'm not on mute. I found a stat that really resonates with me. So according to a study done by Gruber and Finneran, by the time students are done with their secondary education, 81% of students have experienced some sort of sexual harassment. And to me, that stat being such a large number really encompasses why this work is so important, regardless of how old you are. Even if you're not in the day-to-day, just having a conversation and breaking down the stigma, that is sharing your story and actively working to prevent sexual assault and harassment. It's really important, and I really felt like that stat pulled it together.
Thank you very much. Next, I will ask Alexandria. So what do you have any like ways that you would like talk to people about like addressing the issue of sexualization and sexual harassment? I mean, obviously there's going to be cultural changes needed, but anything like legislatively or policy wise that you have thought of in your work?
In my work, I am very much personally one to not always advocate for or take a legislative route, because it is very much quite difficult for me in my experiences thus far to reap any benefits from legislation, policy, and politics, because it has all been violence against me because of my placement in the world as being a Black woman and things, but you know, here at Colby, we do have the Women of Color Alliance, which serves all women of color. And since it is an alliance, we do welcome non-of color women into the space as well. And when we do have these conversations about sexual harassment and sexual assault, sexual misconduct and things like that, Colby has its own programming around it to, you know, provide information about that. When we do think about things that we would like, you know, I think very much locally, because that's what my experience is going to be tailored to. So we have had numerous discussions surrounding having clear language in our student handbook for how these cases are handled, having, you know, resources be provided in a more clear and concise way, because very currently, if anything happens to you, you very much have to Google and sift through about 70 different links before you can find the resources you need. So on the ground, that's been my focus, and what I've been striving to do is students all need to be aware this needs to happen. And then as far as shifting culture and shifting for a better world, I think our work itself has just focused on decreasing the tabooness of the various sexualities, bodies, and things we have here, and then just moving towards radical acceptance of what is. Like, this is the situation, this is what it is, and it doesn't have to be this way, and I can accept that those are two truths, like two separate truths that can be withheld at this time. And so, you know, I tell my club members, let's accept that this is a situation and also accept that we don't like it, so that we can be best comforted and prepared to do the work and demand administration, put clear clauses in our student handbook about how misconduct cases are handled, such that once the student body knows something is not tolerated and there's actual words and paper and rules and a process behind it that says this is not tolerated behavior, then that's when you start to see the small shifts and changes. Like, why would I engage in causing harm and violence in that way when I know the repercussions and I know it's not tolerated here? Because I think a lot of what we're talking about, like the sexualization and the sexual misconduct, a lot of it occurs today because it has been so tolerated, almost expected in a way, because of society, like, you know, people not pushing back against it, and that is due to like a whole bunch of things, but mainly patriarchy and class structures and things like that. So really, that's what those are my two main goals, like providing, you know, women and everyone who experiences, you know, sexual violence, like, hey, it is what this is, and I'm not going to sit here and deny it to you, but you know, I want you to feel confident in knowing that I hear you, I see you, and I understand the pain. And then when those, like, in a comfort and in a space of caring for myself, we can then go out and care about the world and try to make changes. And yeah, those are basically somewhat of what I'm doing right now to make changes. And I definitely focus more so making changes in my small world here in Maine at Colby, and then hoping that the shift will cause a ripple effect. And like maybe Bates will do it next, maybe Bowdoin will do it next, and then Maine will do it all around, and then the states, and then the world. That's kind of the progression I see for this.
Yeah, thank you so much on that perspective. I mean, I'm definitely a big believer of starting with your community and then branching out. I mean, one person is not going to be able to change everybody in the world's thinking. That's not a realistic view. And I think how you're handling your situation at Colby and the work you're doing there is amazing. And although it may feel small, I'm sure there are so many people on that campus that feel so much better because they know that somebody there is fighting for them and fighting for that change. Does anybody else have anything to add on that topic?
Hi. Can you hear me? Right here. You can hear me? All right, good. I'm Patricia Graffam, Pat Graffam. I am the program coordinator for Penobscot Nation's Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Advocacy Center on Indian Island. I'm a citizen of Passamaquoddy, Sabag in Perry, Maine. And this is my first roundtable or whatnot with this group, but I just want to say I am so impressed with the amount of young women, high schoolers, you know, teenagers, college students. It gives me hope. It really does. Growing up when I was in high school, our high school was in Eastport and our reservation was in Perry. And, you know, we had K through 12 on the reservation, and then we would go to a non-native high school. To just have, just to be able to be outspoken as you ladies are. I was pretty outspoken, but it gives me so much hope. And it makes my heart happy. I've just came off of 2 weeks of quarantine. A lot of hard cases. We're dealing with, like, a lot of hard cases, just feeling a little burnt out. But this gives me hope again. My mom, Passamaquoddy citizen, beautiful, beautiful woman, off the reservation, went to Eastport High School. I tell this story to as many people as I can because it breaks my heart that my mom and her sisters and whatnot, the Native girls in the home ec class, were when they had bake sales, were told to just donate some money, bring some money in, because they wouldn't accept the food from the Indian students. My mom, when she was pregnant with me at 16, when she was delivering me in Eastport Hospital, the doctors and nurses were pressuring her to sign me over. Luckily, my dad isn't Native and his parents were privileged. They spoke up, you know, along with my Native grandparents too. But I'm not sure that their voices, you know, in the 60s would have been heard if my grandparents weren't there, my non-Native grandparents. So I am a Native woman. I am privileged. I have fair skin, green eyes. And when we talk about privilege, I feel that I do get some passes. But then on the other hand, I hear more and I see more than other natives would, or other people of color would, because sometimes I don't get flagged and people just start saying stuff around me that they wouldn't say in front of people that may be darker than I am. But I just wanted to say hi, and I'm really, really happy. This is it's fabulous. Gives me hope. This is I don't know. I'm thankful for this group, and I put out a few emails and stuff to some of the young people from our tribes in the state. So I'm hoping that they reach out and join too. But I just wanted to say thank you for this, seriously. In just my life, I've just had a rough few weeks, and this is just like lifting my spirits so much. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I definitely hear a lot of things. I mean, as a white girl, I hear a lot of things. I don't agree with them, and I definitely speak up when things that I hear are not right. And I hope that more and more people start doing that, because I feel like it's not done enough. And I think that it's part of, like, having that privilege is that you need to use it. You need to say, like, hey, like, it's not right. Yeah, so I agree with what you said. I think this group has done so much for me. Like I said earlier, I've been a part of it. This is my 4th year, and it's definitely helped me to come out of my shell, helped me to learn how to use my voice, and really use my voice. Like I thought I was before, but now I'm like really out there and doing things. So I definitely hope that some of the people you reach out to us. We're definitely always looking for people with different perspectives and different backgrounds, because that just helps us become like a more like well-rounded organization in general, and that's super important to us. So panelists, I feel like this is going to be like a really good like fire up question. When you guys hear the word toxic masculinity, what does it bring up for you? What do you guys think about it? Share your thoughts, go off, do your thing.
I'll go. When I hear toxic masculinity, I often chuckle in a sarcastic way, because so much of what men define themselves by has negative effects on the people around them. And you know, they'll bring up, you say toxic masculinity, and men will say, well, because I don't man spread when I'm on the train. They think that conquers it. They're removed from all negative aspects of masculinity. Like it doesn't like revolve around them anymore, because I close my legs and I don't man spread when I'm on the train. And it's just, I laugh at that, because I'm just like, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. And so when I think of toxic masculinity, I think more broadly, I think more so about how the gender binary fails us, and how concepts surrounding gender and being in this polar feminine and femininity versus masculinity, and what being masculine is, and how more often than not toxic masculinity is more so being to a point of obsession with masculine ideals, and not understanding what the root of those masculine ideals are and how they affect the people around them. And so for me, when I think of toxic masculinity, those are the things I think of, and how masculinity is toxic. And yes, it affects people, but it also does internal effects. I, like you said in my intro, I am a psychology major, so I definitely think about that, and how toxic masculinity, you know, causes a lot of repression for men. Like, oh, like you can't cry, like boys aren't supposed to cry, and like things around that. And so it's just like dealing with emotions and understanding emotions, like that's regarded as a woman thing. So then masculinity is failing men to just be emotionally aware and emotionally mature for themselves, in addition to all the other ways in which masculinity is failing us globally.
Do you mind if I add to that?
Jump right in.
Okay. So this is something I think about a lot. It has been coming up for me a lot recently, where personally, when I think about toxic masculinity, I think about macho versus masculine. And I tend to use that terminology a lot when I'm presenting or talking to anyone, because I personally don't want to discourage young men. And this is just from my perspective of presenting. But when I say toxic masculinity, even people like my brother get really defensive immediately. And I've talked about it with him, and we've talked about macho versus masculine. And it's something that I've really tried to break down for myself, because I personally feel that toxic masculinity also really affects me as a young woman, feeling like if I want to be seen as a powerful woman in the workforce or in any area, then I can't cry. All the stereotypes that we consider to live under this patriarchal norm, I can't cry, I can't express emotions, I need to be macho, and then I'll be seen as strong and respected in the community. And I've spent so much time recently really trying to break that down, saying it is so okay to cry. That actually makes you strong. And it's so like, that's really important. That's a part of who we are, whether you're male, female, gender nonconforming, whatever it is okay to cry. That is not about gender or gender norms at all. It's about human nature. I guess, like, is that just me, that I'm the only one that feels that way about like gender norms and wanting to be seen as a strong woman? Is that just me?
I definitely don't think it's just you. I mean, I'm a crier. I cry so much. And when I was growing up, when I was in elementary and middle school, I mean, I used to be so embarrassed. I used to like run away and like hide instead of crying in front of my family, instead of in front of my friends. And I think I definitely agree. It's part of that toxic masculinity that we have to be seen as strong, and we can't show that emotional side. And like throughout high school, I definitely learned that crying is not bad. Showing emotion is not bad. I mean, I definitely use my heart a lot, probably as much, if not more, as my head in situations. I mean, it's definitely a huge like part of my decision making, and literally everything I do every single day. I think about how it would affect the people around me, how like literally everything like that. So it's definitely not you. It's not just you. I think a lot of people feel that way. I try to surround myself with people who have that emotional side to them, because I think it's a really good trait to have, because thinking with your head is good, and but at the same time, I feel like that balance kind of is also good at the same time. So
yeah.
I think for me, when it comes to toxic masculinity, it always brings what Alexandra talked about, how gender binary fails us. I mean, look at the conversation we are having today. It's us, women and girls, on this table. The boys and men are not here. They're not even talking. And the reality of gender-based violence, the reality of patriarchy isn't only a responsibility of women. So we exist in a culture that truly address young girls since a young age to be decent human beings, while tolerates men and boys to just be basic human beings. You know, they developed narratives around toxic masculinity, that boys shouldn't cry, that boys shouldn't do this and that, while girls on the other side, we are being pushed to be so perfect, so right, you know. And that pressure to be the perfect human being as a woman create the gender imbalance that we see. So we have one category of people who are so in touch with their emotions, who are so in touch with their humanity. Then we have another category of people who are just moving as if the world belongs to them because that's how they were raised, you know, that they shouldn't take responsibility because a woman is going to be accountable to that. That, you know, that when a man reacts with violence, there is always a reason, a woman behind it. You understand? You know, women will argue in the streets. Women will be told they're their own enemies. Men will start wars, but nobody will tell them they're their own enemies. But two women will be just having a simple disagreement, then it will turn out on how women don't like each other. But we have men who are starting wars all over the continent. But you know, so it's just in simple ways that our everyday realities are shaped with all of that. And this may sound as theories, but these are our everyday realities. We may not even see it in our everyday life, but if we start looking on the culture of patriarchy and how toxic masculinity shape our life, we can see how we normalize it. You know, even on ourselves, the expectations we imply on ourselves as women and girls, and the explanation we put on boys are always rooted in toxic masculinity and entitlement on women and their bodies and their lived experience, all of that. This is why when it comes to toxic masculinity for me, I don't always take it home in my own life, at my everyday life, what I tolerate and what I don't tolerate, the expectations I have on myself, the expectation I don't have, how I view life, you know, and all of that puts me in a constant mood of realizing that the work around creating a safe world for women and girls starts at home. It starts with all of us, you know, because the boys who are raping, the women who are participating in sexual harassment, it all starts at homes, you know. So it really has to be something that it is being addressed at home in our everyday life, you know. So this is how I see toxic masculinity and everyday reality that we need to question in our life, you know, that we need to make it personal, you know. We stop talking it about as an institutionalized thing, but talk on the everyday realities that we see in your own house, the relationships between gender, the binaries, how you operate in your own home, and then question also the dynamics of power, because the reality about sexual violence, it's about power and how power is being misused, and how relationship between humans are also rooted in power, and how we do not talk about that power that comes with ego and violence. So how do we engage all those conversations from our own home, you know? How do we make it personal? Because the reality is what we see outside, what we see in the street is starting in our own homes, in our everyday lives. So yeah, this is the how toxic masculinity always put me in a place where I question my personal experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree what you were saying about how it starts inside people's homes. I mean, I think it starts from a very, very young age. I mean, little boys are definitely told they shouldn't cry, or like, don't cry, it'll seem like girly or whatever. Like, you don't want to throw like a girl. Like, that's taught from a very, very young age. And I think starting in homes, and like parents need to start breaking that down and stop teaching that to young boys. And I think that we'll get to that point when it's not as much of like a real problem that it is today. So I for sure agree with that. I did want to just throw out there that our next like topic of discussion, we're gonna be taking questions from the audience. I mean, we want this to be as much of like a conversation between like us and the panelists and the audience. So if you have any questions or anything that comes up, please throw it in the comments, and then we can read them out for you, and we can have conversations about what you guys are thinking about as well. So there was a movie, a documentary that you got a link to along with registering with this. You didn't have to watch it to be involved in this conversation, but there was like one topic that I thought was kind of interesting. In the movie, Dr. Caroline Haldeman talks about the great setup, the fact that from time to time, like little boys and men's identities are staked on like rejecting that feminine gender norm. And I think it's kind of like what we were just talking about. And it sets little boys up to like disrespect and like devalue women. So do you agree that it starts at that like super young age, and then it starts in the home? And if so, how do you think, like in other ways, how do you think that shows up and like evolves throughout a little boy or teenager life?
Well, the language, my son played football for 6 years, and the coach would be, come on, ladies, let's get along, you know, or you're doing it like your grandma, or my grandma or my mom could do it better. And that just was so irritating that they were calling them ladies. I took that as, you know, being disrespectful. to me as a woman, you know, or to my grandma. And it's like that, there's that language, you know, trying to make them ashamed if they couldn't get done because they were like a woman, like you say. You know, it's showing that disrespect. It's okay to disrespect. My dad was also that way. I was my father's daughter. I mean, my father's son. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, so he had that negative attitude towards women and that aspect of, you know, having to be tough and not to be crying. And I think that's why all my jobs in some ways were always in a male-dominated field. I did construction work and hung drywall and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, ever since, you know, I see that working in a man's world, the way bosses, you know, just reinforce it all the way through.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm the youngest out of my siblings. I mean, I definitely notice, even now, I notice that, like, my dad, I love him so much, but he does treat my older sister. He thinks she can take on more jobs than I can and do things around the house, like more like handyman type work around the house more than I can. And I used to get super, super frustrated about it. I was like, I can go up on that ladder. I can help you do that. Why aren't you asking me? And he was always like, oh, you're too little, you're too young, you're not like, that's not the stuff you like to do, and stuff like that. And I think it is that language and that and also that, like, the generational type thing, like, yes. Like, my dad is definitely older than most of my friends' fathers. He's in his 60s, so he's not like in his 40s like a lot of my friends' fathers. So he definitely has that big generational gap between me and him. And so I think that does affect a lot of his parenting choices. And like I said, I love him to death, but sometimes it can be a little frustrating. So I definitely know what you're talking about there, coming from the other side of it as the baby of the family. So definitely get that. Does anybody else have anything they wanted to say about that, or are we okay to move on?
I just wanted to bring up a point, and it might jump us into another conversation, but I have heard a lot throughout our talk this evening about the desire to be strong and for our strengths to be seen as women. But I do just want to bring to the forefront that as a Black woman, it's very hard to deal and understand and live with the words of resilience, strength, and womanhood, because very much so, Black women suffer from the stereotype of the strong, independent Black woman. Oh, I'm a strong, independent Black woman. I don't need no man. And it's not to say that we need men, no, but it is to say that that stereotype is expected of me. I've noticed it in the classroom and things like that. And much like you guys' experience, like you all's experiences, my dad had the whole, you know, he coached a basketball team. And at times I felt my dad kind of just ignored me unless it was for Christmas photos, and that all the boys on his basketball team were basically his real kids, his sons. He loved them, and it was just, oh, don't be like my daughter, better run faster, and all these small nuanced statements he would make, but they had very deep effects for me and things. And but then to enter a classroom or other spaces and be expected to be strong and never given the space to be delicate or soft, or no, I can't do that. Like, no, I need help. I need support. To make those like proclamations was always difficult. And till this day, it is difficult to ask for help because I have always been expected to be strong. So I just bring this to the forefront to add a different perspective to the question, and maybe for us to understand that we need to champion for respecting and acknowledging that we are all dynamic women. And what we all need is different and particular to who we are as women. Like, I am a Black woman and things. Like, you are a Native woman, you are a Latinx woman, you know, you are an interracial, you are a mixed woman. Like, you know, what we need will differ because of those things. And so I think it's important to understand that while I do advocate that all of our strengths need to be recognized, and if they aren't recognized, that's a problem and it will need to be addressed, because you will recognize that I am strong, and you will also recognize that my other women colleagues are strong no matter what. But in my case, I think you need to recognize that I can ask for help. And if I ask for help, that it's not to say something about my character or who I am as a person, or to say that I am weaker. It is to say that I need help and things like that. And so I just wanted to bring that perspective to the forefront, because there's a lot of talk about strength here. And then for me, I'm just like, well, I don't want to have to be strong all the time. Like, allow me to need help is basically how I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for that perspective. I think that's a really important thing to bring up. I mean, I think a lot of women, I feel similarly to that, and especially women of color, because there is that stereotype of, like you said, I don't need no man, I don't need, like, you're so independent, but not everybody can be independent all the time. Nobody's independent all the time, and it's okay to ask for help. It's good to ask for help, because then you know you're doing the right thing, you're on the right track. I mean, that's definitely something that, even like as a white person, I struggle with asking for help, because I don't want to be seen as like incompetent. I don't want to be seen as like I can't do anything. So I see what you're talking about, and I know that as a white person, I definitely do not go through it as much or as strongly as women of color do. And I think that perspective is super important to talk about. And I thank you for bringing that up, because it opened my eyes. I mean, I was so excited to do this because I wanted to learn. I wanted to hear different perspectives from people that I don't see in my everyday life. I mean, I live in a super rural town. Like, everybody is conservative here. Like, there's no diversity in my area at all. So definitely having different perspectives coming together is really amazing for me to have, because it definitely furthers my education. And I think I can't speak for everybody here, but I think there are probably other people here thinking the same thing that I am right now. So thank you for that. So one more question I have is, what do you think is the relationship between like empathy and allyship, and like how does someone be a good ally with sexualization and harassment and anything around that that area? Aela, do you want to comment on that first?
Sure. So for me personally, I really resonate with this question because I am an advocate in this community. I'm not a survivor myself. So my work is really based in from an empathetic perspective and stance. I work with survivors all across the country, all different ages, and what I really believe in is having a strong empathetic base to the advocacy work that I do, but then really working on my own self-care too, and finding a delicate balance between supporting survivors today, tomorrow, every day, and also supporting myself. That's a really big thing, because empathy is a beautiful thing, but really can take a lot out of yourself. After doing it for a really long time, I can say that I've definitely struggled with this. I have struggled with finding that balance between supporting survivors and also supporting myself. And I think empathy really comes into play there, because you're able to support the survivor, as best as you can, while also finding a space in that support where you're not their sole, the sole individual that they come to. For me personally, I'm not I'm not licensed in anything. I just know what empathy is, and that's how my support works for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel a lot of that too. I'm not a survivor either, so I was very nervous coming into this conversation because I was like, what am I going to have to add? And then I kind of took a step back and I was like, well, this is for me to learn. This is for me to have a conversation with these amazing people and hear what they think, hear their perspective. So yeah, I definitely get that.
Kaitlyn?
Yeah.
Kaitlyn, hi. I'd like to add something here about being an ally and being a good ally. I'm Jane Root, Executive Director of the Wabanaki Women's Coalition. I'm of a generation that would be your grandparents. Just saying. And so, first I want to say, yes, whoever, I can't remember who said how, I think it was Pat, how exciting it is to hear young women as strong, I don't want to use that word, as powerful as you all are, and with your strong voices at your young age, excites me, because I didn't really start in this work until I was well into my 30s. But what I want to say about being an ally is that a good ally listens to the voices of women of color, including Native American girls and women. And not only listens, but make sure they're at the table. So if you're at a table as a Caucasian white person, and you don't look around and see the faces of others who are people of color and Native American or Latino, whatever it is, you have a responsibility to say to the organizers, wait a minute, this table is missing a lot of people. Let's invite those people, more people to our table, so that we have a well-rounded knowledge of what's going on for whatever the topic is. It doesn't matter what the topic is. A good ally will make sure that all the voices are there, or as many as possible are there. That was my thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much on that. So it is actually after 8 o'clock right now. So I'm just gonna kind of wrap things up a little bit. I mean, I think this is very educational for me, especially. I'm sure everybody else is feeling the same way. So when we started talking about these Ruckus roundtables, we didn't want just more conversation, because even though conversation's good, like, we want to push for action. We want change. And so these panelists that we've had talking to us today, they're being part of that change. They're really taking action, and that's so amazing. So we've asked each of them to include some resources that they wanted to send out to people. So those are going to be in an email that will be sent out tomorrow to all of you. So you guys have that, those resources at your disposal to do what you want. You can share them even more. And so don't forget that there's a spectrum of action. You don't have to go out on the street and actually protest. I mean, like, for a lot of people, that's not possible. And there are other ways to make change. There's other ways to be an activist and an ally. And so there's more than one right way to make change. And don't let that fear paralyze you. I think it's a good thing to, like, kind of step back and look at the whole picture. Because even though you might be afraid, there might be people around you that might be even more afraid, and you have to work to help them overcome that fear as well. And we just want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight at our second roundtable. These are made possible by a bunch of generous sponsors like iBet Creative and many others. The next in the series will be on February 17th. It's also from 7 to 8 p.m. The topic is going to be about using your voice, gender and race on the page. And we'll be talking with authors about the process of writing your story and their truth. We hope that you can join us for that one too. In the meantime, you'll receive more information on our first art auction celebrating women and gender expansive main artists to benefit our work at the end of this month. We strive to keep our programming free and low of cost, so we do appreciate any donations that you can help us out with. So thank you again for joining us tonight, and please be sure to go cause a ruckus.
Thank you so much.
Hi.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. And thank you, panelists. You were fabulous. All your different perspectives were very powerful. Thank you so much.